Welcome back, everybody, to our frowny face final wrap-up from Cannes with our friends from Ketchum. Having butchered Indy's title yesterday, I'm going to ask my two guests to introduce themselves and tell me what their role at Ketchum is. And then we're going to talk a little bit about creativity, and we're going to talk a little bit about the work, and we're going to talk a little bit about the big themes at this year's Festival of Creativity. So,
great. Well, hello, everyone. I am Mary Elizabeth Germaine, and I am the Chief Data and Strategy Officer with Ketchum.
And I'm Tamara Norman. I'm the Chief Corporate Affairs and Reputation Officer at Ketchum.
okay. So, I think it would have been fair to say that 10 years ago, these were two things that got totally shortchanged at Cannes. This year, a little different. And in your role, you must have been pleased to see not only data being referenced pretty much constantly throughout the event, but also winning campaigns, and this hasn't always been the case. Winning campaigns that were creative in the service of real sales and business results, particularly the PR winners.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I saw there was quite a trend, and I think it was data on both sides. I think all of the winning campaigns had a data-driven insight that set up the strategy for the big idea. And then all of the winners, it was a business result, a change in brand, a sales metric displayed and prominently featured as showing the effectiveness of the campaign. So it was great to see that we're moving so far away from just the visibility of earned media.
I hope you were as relieved as I was to see winners that didn't just stop at reach.
Yes, went well beyond earned impressions to an actual sales metric or a meaningful brand metric.
And just to stick with you for a second, are we at all concerned that the results are almost always insta sales rather than, and I'll come to you with this as well because this is your sweet spot, rather than long-term reputational relational shift? In other words, a lot of the work we saw had for the 3 months after the campaign, sales were up 20% on the same quarter last year or something like that. But those tend to be short-term results and not,
the longer-term
relationship building. Now, intuitively, I am absolutely sure that the CeraVe work, the edible mascot work, and the Golan work for Specsavers all had a real impact on the core brand relationship with its consumers. But that often doesn't show up immediately, and it's hard to build in. And it does trouble me that we focus on the short term so much.
Well, I think it all depends on what the outcome, the desired outcome of the campaign was. If it was meant to drive sales, then I think they were featuring sales. I have to say that I did see, as we walked the work, a lot of the entries did reference how they drove awareness and even consideration. And I think it was the U.S. Bank work that it went like 1-for-1 awareness to consideration as well as new customer acquisition. So I think it just depends on
the translation.
The translation. Yes.
Yeah. Indy mentioned that yesterday, and I fear we may have misattributed it to another bank.
Oh.
But that's one of my favorite campaigns. It was a finalist for Best in Show and Saver, and one of my favorite things here.
So I think it just depends on what that desired outcome is. We often talk about creativity not just for the sake of creativity, but to drive a meaningful impact in some way. That meaningful impact may be building brand reputation. That meaningful impact may be sales, and it may be both.
What's your perspective on? I talked about this a little bit with other people here. That there are more CCOs here than there have ever been before, I think.
Absolutely.
And there's more talk about reputation.
Yes.
As opposed to just sell.
Yes. And I think you actually have seen that in some of the work, right? You did see things like brand lift, but we've also seen things like reputation lift. I spent a lot of time yesterday walking the work and even saw metrics like employee loyalty, employee pride in a few of the examples. And I think that's great. And I think what that shows is the integration of the work and, again, thinking about the end result and what you're trying to achieve. But I definitely think as someone that's been in corporate communications, it's much more on the stage this year. And that's great to see.
Yeah.
Well, and Tam, we saw that one thing yesterday with that airline that was talking about creativity, and they asked what were your KPIs, and their leading KPI was employee engagement.
Yeah, I think we're beginning to wake up to the idea that all of those stakeholder universes.
Yep.
I mean, some of us have been awake to it, but people at this discussion have been awake to it forever. But the wider marketplace is beginning to wake up to this idea that all of these different stakeholders are not separate and distinct groups that don't interact.
That's exactly
and
right.
Have no connection.
That's exactly right.
Your employees are brand ambassadors,
Absolutely.
which is the simplest concept to understand.
That's right.
So of course, if you can get them excited, you can get that excitement to go out into the marketplace.
Absolutely. The other trend that I think that that I noticed that has had a reputation component is that so many of the winning entries this year took advantage of a cultural moment. And I think in order to be able to do that, brands have to really know who they are as a company, what that DNA is, and in order to capitalize on that quickly. The other piece to that too is in thinking about the overall, the business's ability to respond. So a lot of the winning entries required not only communications and marketing, but required the business to change, right? New product line, new packaging. And, again, the brand needs to know who they are from a reputation standpoint in order to be able to motivate and activate.
Well, and I think integration was key.
I just want to quickly pick up, we'll talk about integration in a minute because I absolutely agree. I want to pick up on that because I would say that both the Golan and the CeraVe work didn't capitalize on cultural moments. They created their own cultural moment. Right? Michael Cera at the Super Bowl became a cultural moment because of all the PR work that was done building up to that. Rick Astley, who I hadn't thought about in 40 years, became a cultural moment again because Golan and Specsavers created this incredibly authentic moment around him.
Right.
So it's not just capitalizing on, it's creating cultural.
Yeah.
And that, again, is something I think PR is uniquely suited to. But I want to come to your point about integration because, and again, I feel like I'm so optimistic coming out of this year's festival that I have completely lost touch with my own brand, which is, curmudgeon. But it also seems to me that this was the year where integration, even when people on the ad side of the business were talking about it, was a genuine collaboration between agencies from different disciplines, not the old, we created this big ad and then we asked the PR agency to create either PR for the ad, which, Jesus, we're reduced to that, or, build a PR campaign that fits with this. And I'm sorry, I'm rambling at this point, but I've always thought every great PR idea can be turned into an ad. Not every great ad can be turned into a PR campaign. And so what we're seeing now is collaboration, I think, in advance to make sure that whatever it is that we're doing collectively, it works in earned and paid and owned and shared as well.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I think one is it's everybody coming together and putting the idea at the center. And it's I keep saying it's the blurred lines of disciplines. You don't know where one discipline necessarily starts and ends anymore, that people are truly working, again, to solve that client challenge in a creative way, working collaboratively to do that. And every discipline, it's almost like they know they need the other to drive that domino effect, right? The idea becomes bigger when all hands are working together. And I think that you saw a lot of that in every panel that I listened to. It was the breaking down of those silos, much more this year than even I was here a year ago. And I don't feel like that integration theme was as consistent last year as we heard it this year.
And I want to come back to you on this because, you know, on the marketing side of the business, we use integration to mean advertising and PR and digital and social and, you know, experiential and design and everything else working together collaboratively to sell the product.
Yep.
But actually, there's stakeholder integration too.
Yes.
This was sort of what we were talking about with the employee audience.
Absolutely.
Right? That if you're doing this stuff right, you also view the stakeholder universe in an integrated way.
Absolutely.
And there was more of that.
Absolutely. You know, we saw a lot of audiences covered and a lot of audiences being measured, I think, in the work this year. The other thing that I think is really important is when talking about the idea at the center is that the ideas this year were very simple. I was talking to a colleague yesterday in New York and in 10 minutes explained 3 campaigns that I saw that I liked and was able to do that in 3 minutes because the ideas were so simple. And that, I think, is a great example of, you know, creativity at its best, when you can explain a campaign, you know, in a short amount of time and, you know, how effective it's been. Okay.
Quickly, one other takeaway from this year's festival that we haven't discussed.
So one of my things, there was a lot of talk, and you covered it earlier in this week, talking to Joanne about AI. And I think that there is, we're still working out how AI and creativity come together. I think there's a little bit of an emerging tension, if you will, in how AI can be used and complement creative and like the craft of creativity. So I'm going to be interested to see how that trend continues and how conversations there continue, because there is a purity of the craft of creative that AI can't replicate, but it can be a tool that we're using. But it was just in some of the panels that I listened to, it was like, there's a little bit of a tension here. And where are we going to go?
We were talking about this yesterday, and I am not AI savvy by any stretch of the imagination. I'm too old at this point. But my question was, would AI have, or will AI ever be able to come up with Michael Cera?
My opinion, I don't think so.
Rick Astley, right?
There's a humanity to it.
Right.
There's a humanity to it, and AI isn't trained on humanity, right? At the end of the day, you're communicating to humans, and there has to be that human element. It's an opinion of one, but I think that the humanity side of creativity, AI is not in a place. I mean, who knows 100 years from now, 50 years from, I don't know. But
well, we sort of started earlier in the week with a quote from Cheryl Gurn saying exactly the same thing, right? That it was the human element that made creativity special. Hope that continues to be true, even as we use tools more effectively.
One of the things that surprised me this year that I loved seeing was the use of humor and fun in the campaigns that won, or even the campaigns that were shortlisted. And not that, you know, we're not solving, big purpose ideas. There was a lot of that too, but there was a lot of fun and a lot of humor and tapping into those cultural moments that was really on the stage this year.
Yeah, I think that was very much a reaction to the time we're living in, right? I mean, we are in a time of polarization and anger and anxiety. And, you know, I think the idea that what we do as PR people and as marketers can bring joy into the world is important to keep hold of when we're in such desperate times.
Absolutely.
So, okay, that's again, totally off-brand optimistic note on which to wrap up.
Changing you.
We bring out the best in you.
I am going to get back to London, which I'm pretty sure will reawaken my inner curmudgeon almost immediately. But thank you so much.
At least you had a week of optimism.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.